Hour number 3, Overdrive. Jim, Tatti, Dave Feschuk with you, subbing for O-Dog Hayes and Noodles. And now on TSN 2, continuing on TSN 1050. Overdrive is brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Chris Johnston will be by very shortly on the Maple Toyota hotline. Dallas Stars got fined $100K today for having some sort of team function on December 26th. I don't know why teams do this. It's clear you can't do it, and they did it, and now I guess $100,000 to them isn't much, but nonetheless. Why?
Well, yeah, they ran an optional skate on Boxing Day, which is against the CBA. It's directly in the CBA that Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and Boxing Day are days you can't ask players to do anything. And the Leafs got fined a few years back, Tatman, for traveling on Boxing Day, which is a violation of the cap and understandable violation. They wanted to get where they were going ahead of it, but to the letter of the law, the Stars violated it, and they were punished for it.
See, that flying on Boxing Day, I mean, that makes sense because you're playing on the 27th. Why would you want to fly in on the same day? Because the NHL doesn't operate that way normally. You fly in the night before.
Yeah, and there's teams that have done it by waiting until midnight. You know, you wait till midnight on Boxing Day, so then you're technically flying on December 27th instead of December 26th. But then you're getting in later than usual, and is that good for your team? Is that better for your team than just waiting till the morning after, flying in the day of the game, which is also unusual? So either way you look at it, because the NHL, it's the only league that really does this. All the other leagues are playing on Christmas Day. The NHL has this little carved out this 3-day break for the players on Christmas and Christmas Eve and Boxing Day, and so it does present some challenges for teams trying to stick to their routine. And I guess the Stars were trying to stick to theirs, and they got banged for it.
They did. A reminder here: don't forget to make your prediction for the final game in First Up's Monday Night Football Jackpot. Head to tsn1050.ca, predict the score and winning team of tonight's game, Lions and Niners. You have until 7 o'clock, which isn't too far from now, to make your prediction. If you're right, you could win the jackpot. Full details at tsn1050.ca. That's the First Up Monday Night Jackpot. I guess, we're going to talk to CJ a lot about the trade deadline, where the Leafs go, what they're looking at. And you and I talked on Leafs Guy, which airs at noon on TSN 1050 every day, Monday to Friday. That Fraser Minton, I mean, obviously there's a numbers problem there, but they, when they had all those forwards out and Fraser Minton was there, seemed to be a better look, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. He's a guy that plays with tremendous IQ, tremendous energy, which are two things there in short supply of at times in the bottom six. Or certainly, if it's not short supply, it's not sufficient supply for a team that wants to style itself as a championship contender in this league. They're just not getting enough smart plays, impactful plays, scoring plays from their bottom six this season in general. We've documented that again and again and again. And so Minton, I thought, brought a nice breath of, heady play mixed with really, that young guy push that you need. And they've got a bunch of not so young guys like the Holmbergs and the Camps of the world that just aren't kind of putting up the kind of numbers and making the kind of impact that you'd like to see. And so you do start looking for answers, and maybe Minton could be one of them down the road here.
Yeah, I mean, if you're starting a playoff series with that Leaf lineup tomorrow, would you have? I'm not going to put words in your mouth. Would you have Holmberg and Kampf down the middle?
Well, if it is what it is today with Matthews out of the lineup, then you probably have to. I mean, that's unless you've got to make a trade otherwise. I just don't know what else you do. I mean, you can't to expect Fraser Minton to solve all your problems in terms of center depth when he's played a grand total of 15 NHL games in his career and he's 20 years old. It's you're making a big mistake there. Not that he couldn't help you, but you can't expect him to help you. And I think expecting him to do anything more than what he's done so far is kind of putting him in a bad spot. And so, look, there's work to do here for Brad Treliving. That's not, breaking news. But this team needs help. And you got between now and March 7th to find it.
Yeah, my suggestion is that Fraser Minton is a good sort of midseason, solution to that problem. I wouldn't see him in the playoffs, but down the road you would, but I just think that they need to bring in center depth because, again, they know what's going on with Auston Matthews, but we don't. But if it's going to sort of track the way it has all season long, definitely need another center.
Yeah, and you hope they know what's going on with Matthews, but I think there's a question mark there. They've miscalculated. It feels like they've miscalculated in bringing him back too early after the initial 9-game absence. Maybe it's something they couldn't have calculated for. Maybe it's just one of those injuries that's difficult to predict how it's going to react. But clearly, the fact that he's going to miss his 5th game of this latest absence tomorrow in the afternoon game on New Year's Eve is not a good sign, even though we hear from Craig Berube that he's getting better. And maybe it'll be nothing. Maybe in the grand scheme of things in mid-April, we won't even barely be looking back at Auston Matthews in those 2 absences he had because he'll be fine and he'll be back to being who he is. But until we see that, it is a huge concern. And you have to wonder exactly what the Leafs know because if they knew everything, you'd hate to think they would have done it this way.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting premise that maybe they don't. But joining us now on the Maple Toyota Hotline is Chris Johnston, our TSN hockey insider. CJ, how are you?
I'm doing well, guys. How are you?
Good. Is there any tidbit you can give us on the Auston Matthews? Just a small little morsel, anything?
I mean, I wish I could. I'm hearing a lot of the same sort of encouraging comments that obviously Craig Berube made to the reporters in Toronto today, but it's a bit of a frustrating kind of situation. I'm sure no one's more frustrated than Auston Matthews himself. Only being able to play 24 games. I think tomorrow's number 38 for the Leafs. So, he's only played 60% or so roughly of the games this season. And I'm with Dave. In a sense, this could be one of these things. We don't have the crystal ball. We don't know where it's going to go. It could wind up being a whole lot of nothing. And we might say, hey, who cares about the first half of the season when he was only in and out of the lineup a little bit because he had this monster second half and a great playoffs. But, it's certainly, not a great sign that he's had to take so much time off. And it doesn't sound like it's anything that I do think at this point, what I've heard is they have a really good idea of what it is. I don't have an exact idea of what it is myself, but that it's not an issue where they're wondering, this or that. I think it's a lot of, how does it feel for Auston? Is he comfortable playing? And obviously, I think that the general decision that's been reached is why push it at this point? If there's any doubt, if there's any feeling that it's not, at 100%, it's wise to just sit out the games now versus, hoping you can get to a point where that's not the case when they get more important.
Yeah, no doubt about it, CJ. That makes a lot of sense. But when you look at the center depth problem on this team, and I think it's going to be a conversation we have more than once between now and the March 7th trade deadline. I mean, what kind of prospects do you think are out there for Brad Treliving in the early stages of the trade talk around the league? Because Camp hasn't produced at the level they'd hoped he would. Holmberg hasn't produced at the level they hoped he would. We've talked about Minton, Tatti, and I just now about, it would be nice if they could maybe count on him, but it's a lot to ask from a 20-year-old. But how do you think the Leafs see their need for trade to trade for a center in terms of depth, and what do you think might be out there?
Well, it's definitely a high priority. It actually has been before this Matthews situation, got to where we are today. This was something the Leafs front office have kind of had in the back of their minds, or even closer to the front of their minds, all season long. That it was the most likely area where they'd have to, try to bolster things. And I think ideally, what you're looking at, I mean, obviously you're not replacing Auston Matthews in any way, shape, or form. So you're hoping if you're in the front office that you've got him in the number one spot, that you've got John Tavares most likely playing as the number 2 center on this team. And then, you're probably finding someone who fits as a number 3 centerman. And traditionally those players are out there. I look at the Oilers last year, for example, trading for Adam Henrique from Anaheim at the deadline. They had a nice playoff run with him, re-signed him. I mean, that type of guy is probably what's available. You look around at teams that are probably not in the playoff spot. Yanni Gourde, for example, is someone, who's played center throughout his career, been on the wing a little bit more recently in Seattle, but maybe fits as a third line center. I mean, we're not probably talking about a trade unless something unforeseen happens in the next 7, 8, 9 weeks. It's probably not going to be a big headline grabber, but I think you're trying to find someone who can produce a little bit of offense, but you can trust defensively, lock things down on the third line because, you know, in the lineup that's playing right now, I mean, Pontus Holmberg was their second line center. I mean, clearly they don't want to go into any playoff series with that as the plan. You know, sometimes you make plans and someone laughs and you got to adjust on the fly. But certainly, you know, I think you're going to be looking at a third line centerman for them. You know, probably someone with some experience, someone who can win faceoffs, that can be trusted defensively. You know, and ideally for the Leafs, chip in a bit offensively because, you know, for all the ways we might look at what this generation of this team has been, you know, they really have not scored enough in the playoffs. And so I think if they can get anything that can help the bottom six contributing a little bit in a playoff series, you know, could be the difference between a short spring and a longer one.
So a couple ways they could go at this. They could bring in somebody for short term, or what I hope happens is they actually bring in somebody that speaks to, you know, Tavares over the next 2 or 3 years, depending on what they're going to do there. Does that one make any sense?
It could. It's just those aren't the kinds of trades we don't see. But you know what? This has been actually, if you look around the league, there's been, I would say, different sort of trades in the NHL than we usually see to this point in the season. And so I can't rule it out. I mean, I agree. It makes sense. You know, the Leafs have some big questions to answer with their salary cap picture. I mean, are they re-signing Mitch Marner? What's that going to cost? Are they bringing back John Tavares? What's that going to cost? You know, everything kind of flows out of, I think, those decisions, because if the answer is no to either of those questions, they obviously have, you know, a fair bit of cap space to work with in terms of, you know, looking beyond this season. And you know, maybe it makes sense to bring in a player with some term on his contract. You know, those haven't been the sort of trades we've seen, but this is a unique time in the NHL. I mean, the cap is finally rising after, you know, a number of years around those pandemic years where it was kind of flat and you know, made it really extremely difficult to move players around. Now this is an environment where there's going to be more money to spend. I think there's a lot of optimism, and frankly, I just think there's a lot of teams that are kind of getting to panic mode. I mean, there's just a lot of teams around the league that haven't progressed the way they thought, and so now they're, I think, thinking a little bigger in terms of the sort of moves they might make. And so, you know, I don't have a player to toss out right now and say that this could be the one for the Leafs, but I think that they would be open to that idea if it does present itself. And this might be kind of this chaotic year where that sort of trade is out there and it makes sense for Toronto.
Hey, in the category of why do teams do what they do, CJ, explain to us why, you know, Peter DeBoer, the Dallas Stars, would call an optional practice on Boxing Day when it's clearly a violation of the collective bargaining agreement between the league and the players. They know they're going to get fined $100,000 for it. They do it anyway, and they get fined $100,000 for it. What do you make of that?
Well, I think there's a small amount of gray in this, and you know, I follow just enough players on Instagram to know that there were other players for other teams that were skating on those days, 24th, 25th, and 26th, where it's not allowed to call sort of what we would call formal team events. You know, I think where the Stars tripped out, quite frankly, is Peter DeBoer gave an interview where he talked about it as a practice, you know, insinuated that the young players, as always, when it becomes to an optional practice, you know, didn't really have the option, so to speak. And so I think it was in the framing publicly that they really got nailed on this one. The truth is, I think a lot of NHL players do skate during that window. That, you know, 3 days, as much as it doesn't sound like a big deal, you know, for as high end of athletes as these guys are, that's a long time to take off the ice, and a lot of players don't want to do that. You know, where the CBA comes in here is the team can't make a player, which is essentially an employee, you know, come to work on those days. But if they maybe open the rink and say, hey guys, just so you know, there's ice time at this time, you know, have at it. You know, I certainly don't think the Stars were the only team that had players skate during that window, but it's the framing of it as a practice that got them nailed. And you might remember the Leafs got nailed sort of on a similar thing a couple of years ago. They flew on December 26th instead of waiting to the 27th, and they got a similar $100,000 fine. So, you know, it's not to excuse it in any way, but I think that it was a little bit in the gray, and they crossed a little bit. The way it was framed publicly is frankly what nailed them. So, you know, this is probably why coaches don't want to talk to media guys, because that's what costs them $100,000.
One of the reasons. I want to ask you about if there's a team that could actually sort of open the trade window and get ahead of things. I'm looking at the Rangers here, just absolutely befuddling. In Detroit with a new coach, maybe, you know, there was some talk that the previous coach didn't play the young guys enough, and maybe the new guy does, and you figure out the young guys aren't good enough. I mean, who sort of sets or opens the door here for the trade deadline?
Well, the Rangers probably would be at the top of the list. That you've identified the right one there. Yeah. I wonder about Buffalo. That was a team I know before the holiday freeze kicked in on rosters, was involved in a lot of different trade discussions. I mean, obviously not anything that was so close that it got done the day that freeze lifted here in the last couple of days. But, they've been similarly kind of struck with, frustrated expectation. And I think they have a lot of players teams they have a lot of players that are supposed to be better than they are, that are young, that haven't performed well. And so, those might be bigger types of trades. And even Vancouver, kind of a strange time there. Obviously, Pettersson and Hughes currently out injured, but with all the smoke around JT Miller and Pettersson and, the status of their relationship, with that team not, kind of clicking at the level they did last year when they got all the way to Game 7 of the second round. If I was to pick one, I think it would be, or pick three rather, it would be the Rangers, the Sabres, or the Canucks. I could see sort of kicking off the fireworks the most. And, the Rangers probably have to be number one because I don't even know how to describe this team. I've been around the league a long time. I don't recall a team that was really good last year and for many years prior to that really didn't make a lot of, personnel changes. And it's just has not worked. It feels like an organizational, almost a culture issue. It feels like, maybe the players, going to work is just not like this. I can't really explain it, I guess, is what I'm getting at, is because on paper, that team is not that much worse, or shouldn't be much worse than the one last year, which won the President's Trophy, and they can't even win a game in December right now. So, I do think that there's a high level of alert there in terms of trying to shake things up even more than they already have with the Trouba trade and the like.
CJ, what do you make of Edmonton? I mean, they bring in Jeff Skinner in the offseason on a one-year deal for $3 million, not exactly chump change, expecting him to be a goal scorer that can contribute. He's got, 6 goals to start the year. He gets healthy scratched. Last night in Anaheim, they blow a 2-goal lead. They lose their second straight on a little California trip. What do you make of Skinner not fitting in there and what they might do about it?
Well, I certainly don't think it's a foregone conclusion. He'll still be there, beyond the trade deadline. Edmonton's a team like a lot of teams that have been trying to win the Cup over multiple years. They don't have a ton of cap flexibility. If they're looking at bigger changes, it means, money going out the door, not just the players that they can bring in. And you're right, it really hasn't worked for Skinner. And it's to be scratching him at this point in the season is obviously not a good sign about how it's gone. I mean, they picked up Kasperi Kapanen. Leafs fans obviously familiar with him off waivers. He's basically outperformed Skinner. He was picked up for free in season and has kind of found a spot at least a little bit in their top 6 for the time being. And so, those were minutes that were earmarked for Skinner when he signed on July 1st, and just hasn't really blossomed. And I do think that, given how much is riding on the season for the Oilers, that they can't necessarily be patient. And so, there's still a bit of time for him to salvage things. The trade deadline isn't tomorrow, and there's a world maybe he gets put on a line in the next game and things take off, and all this is just a little bit of water under the bridge. But at this point, I certainly think it's his spot on the team, even just for the remainder of the season, is tenuous. Because they're going to have to look to replace him if they feel they can't use him, and they're also looking for a defenseman, which they have been all year. So I think Edmonton will be one of the pretty active teams as we get closer to March 7th, and that could be players going out in addition to those coming in.
A close second to the Rangers story is Nashville. They're just a point ahead of San Jose. I mean, the big things were expected there. They spent a lot of money in the offseason. What's going to happen?
They're a total wild card. They have 3 first-round picks this year, too. So they spent all that money in free agency, and they were sort of geared up potentially to be a team that would be adding, obviously, this season at the deadline with all that, the picks that had accumulated. And obviously that isn't going to be the case now. But, they've made sort of a variety of trades. They're trading away some of their older pieces. A guy like Alexander Carrier, they traded just to Montreal, who they had signed. I feel like they're completely open for business and looking at a lot of different things. I mean, I think what you'll see in Nashville is that they have some younger players they like in their farm system. They're going to bring up as the second half goes along. And, more than likely, I think there's going to be more guys going out the door. I mean, it's not going to be a complete teardown. We're not talking the Stamkoses, the ones who just signed. I don't think that's what they're looking at, but certainly, It didn't work this year. They'd really like another centerman. I think that's been one of the issues is they brought in Marcia Show and Stamkos, who both play wing at this point in their career. They already had Gus Nyquist and Philip Forsberg. They have pretty good top six wingers, I would say. They didn't have enough centers to play with those guys, and the season's sort of gotten away from them. But, Barry Trotz, I think, has made 7 trades already this season, and I wouldn't put it past them to get to 10 or more by the time the deadline comes. So they're a team to watch, both as a buyer or a seller. I guess is what I'm saying, Jim, is that I don't think it's one or the other. They're just open to doing anything to shift things up because this season has not gone as planned in any way.
The guy who actually jumps off the page when you look at their salary list as a fit in Toronto is Ryan O'Reilly. Is that even possible?
I don't know if you can rule it out, honestly. I mean, I'm not saying he's the Leafs' top target or what have you, but I'm with you. It fits in a lot of ways. I don't believe he has any no trade protection in his contract. So, obviously it's something that the Predators could look to do. I mean, he's the top line center in Nashville. He was last year when they made a run to the playoffs. And so he's an important part of their team. But, I think that they will have to make a decision on him. And he chose to go sign in Nashville as a free agent after his brief time in Toronto a few years ago when he was brought in at the deadline. And so, I don't know exactly how he'd feel about it, but I don't think you can rule it out as a possibility. And the fit is there. I mean, I think certainly at this point in his career, whether he's a second line center with a team like the Leafs or third, I think it makes a lot of sense for a team trying to win the Cup, a competitive team. I don't want to start any rumors, but you can never say never. I don't think Nashville will be looking to move him, if I'm being honest. It's just, but they are a team that it feels like they're willing to consider everything. There's not a lot of no's. I don't get the sense in talking around the league to people when they call Barry Trotz. It's not a big list of things you can't do. He's open to doing business, and so let's stay tuned and see if there's a little more smoke there on O'Reilly.
Well, if there's smoke on O'Reilly, CJ, I mean, Leaf fans, of course, looking to recapture the one shining moment of playoff glory they've had with the win over Tampa a couple of years back. Why not Luke Schenn as well? Why not make it a package deal? Who says no?
I mean, I don't think the Leafs would, honestly. You're hitting the nail on the head here. I mean, the defense has been better as a whole this season. Not as good lately, of course. But I feel like something's a little off, and that if they could get someone who could sort of anchor a third pair on the right side, what Schenn did pretty well. I mean, I don't know if it was even the third pair because he played with Riley a lot in that playoff series against Tampa. But that would make a lot of sense. So maybe there's a third go around for Schenn in Toronto. I mean, there's worse rumors out there, and certainly at this stage of Luke Schenn's career, I think that it would make sense for Nashville if they can get something back for him to move him. And so, look, I think that those are, honestly, from a high level, those are fits. It doesn't mean I haven't thought through the Caps perspective, or I haven't heard specific intel on maybe those players going there, but both would make sense. And strangely enough, both were with that Leafs team that beat Tampa a couple years ago.
CJ, thanks very much. Happy New Year.
Yeah, same to you guys. Have a good day tomorrow.
Thank you. CJ joined us in the Maple Toyota hotline. Check out Maple Toyota's huge truck and SUV lineup, including Tundra, 4Runner, Highlander, and Grand Highlander in stock, ready to deliver. Visit mapletoyota.com. Dave, I like where you were coming from, just because I'm not going to necessarily agree with you on they get the two guys from Nashville. But as you bring in a new coach and the ask is for everybody to play a certain way, we don't have the numbers. They do, but they know that not everybody's going to be converted here. I mean, obviously there's going to be some roster casualties, not only because of injury, because of the cap, but just because. I mean, nobody's really talked about that much.
Well, you saw with Timothy Liljegren was the first one, right, where he really didn't even get a chance. They signed him to a deal, and then Craig Berube really didn't like what he saw out of Timothy Liljegren right out of the gate. And so he was gone, very quickly because of that. And yeah, you look, I mean, that's a great point, Jim. There's guys who just haven't responded well, who have not adapted well to the new way of doing things in Leafland. And it's maybe it's counterintuitive because the superstar guys have done really well. We've been talking about Marner on career high pace and Willie Nylander up near the league leading goals and John Tavares doing so well at his advanced age. It's been the guys in the bottom of the lineup Ryan Reeves isn't doing well. He's been scratched how many times now? And, the Kampf and Holmberg story has been told many times about how they're underperforming compared to expectations. So, you're going to have to look elsewhere to fill some of these holes. And, hey, man, why not get the band back together? The guys that got them to the second round for the first time in whatever it was, 20-something years, O'Reilly and Schenn were a big part of that. And if Barry Trotz is in the mood to deal, Brad Treliving better be on the phone.
Just looking at their salaries, so Ryan O'Reilly's at 4.5 and Schenn comes in at 2.75. So, I mean, there is you could work that in there somehow. It's not insurmountable.
Well, especially if Matthews is on LTIR, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that opens up a big door.
Until the playoffs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just kidding. I don't think they're going to do that. But yeah, look, I mean, the salary cap gymnastics are obviously, as CJ points out, it's easy to have these high level, 30,000 feet. In theory, this guy would fit great, but can it be done financially? Can you figure out a way to maneuver the contracts necessary to make it work? That's the other question that has got to be answered, and that's the reason why 99.9% of the trades that get discussed don't actually get across the finish line.
Coming up next, talking basketball with Leo Rautins as the Raptors skid hits 10. This is Overdrive on TSN 2 and TSN 1050. Overdrive, Jim Tatti, Dave Feschuk, subbing for the regulars, some of them working elsewhere, some of them enjoying some time off. And we'll just leave it at that. Overdrive is brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. So, Dave, and we're going to bring Leo in very shortly. Let me just detail this. You go back to early December. There's a win against Miami. There's a win against the Pacers, 2 in a row. That's December 2nd and 3rd. And then you have 10 straight losses. That's tough. And with everybody coming back, then it's all sort of discombobulated because everybody has to sort of find their own way, and so does the team. And it's been tough. Let's bring in Leo Rautins now. Leo, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. How are you guys doing?
Good. Trying to make sense of this. Are the Raptors just a little weary from all the losses, or how do you read this?
It's called the rebuild, and it's going to be ugly. I mean, you can look at it a lot of different ways, but okay, first of all, the entire season the team has not been whole, right? So you got a lot of guys that have never played the minutes they're playing right now. So that's obviously going to wear them down. It's going to be taxing. Not having key players like a Pirtle, a Barnes, then putting them back into the lineup. All of a sudden, a Brown comes in. You get, when you're doing all that, right? All the changing and the injuries and in a lineup, out of the lineup. It wears you down physically and mentally as a team. And it's not an excuse. It's just a reality. And when you're not talented enough and deep enough to absorb it, this is what you get. And quite frankly, I was more surprised that Darko was able to keep things going as well as he did for as long as he did. Yeah. The way they were competing and staying in games. I'm more surprised about that than I am this.
Well, Leo, yeah, for one thing, I don't think anybody's surprised they're near the bottom of the standings, given the injuries and given the way the season began with Masai declaring it a rebuilding situation. But we haven't seen, a call from Scotty Barnes like we saw the other night where he's saying the effort's not there. We haven't seen, this team get drilled like they're getting drilled by historic proportions, giving up 136 to Atlanta and 155, a franchise record, to Memphis, and 139 to the Knicks. Like what's the risk here that you're building a really ugly culture if it keeps going this way, Leo?
Well, it's always a risk in a rebuild, right? I mean, you can talk all the culture you want, but if you're losing, that's a risk. And the reality is, if you win, you're not going to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish in a rebuild. So, it's a catch-22. The best case scenario is what we saw earlier when it's competitive. You're coming down the wire. Yeah, you're going to lose some games because you're just not talented enough or you don't have everybody. But you could see development. You could see guys learning. You could see guys getting better. But you're not going to win. So best case scenario, you're still going to do well, hopefully, in the draft. And you're developing guys, win all around. But, that's hard to do. It's really hard to do. And now from an evaluation standpoint, like I said, you got a lot of guys that haven't played these kind of minutes. Some guys are new to the league. Some guys are, getting a whole different look as far as, like an RJ now is a key player. Grady Dick has stepped into a whole different zone for him. Okay, how are guys going to respond? Can they sustain it? Can they, what are their downs going to be? How can are they going to be able to get out of their funk quicker or longer? That's all part of your evaluation, right? I mean, you're going to be looking at guys. A lot of these guys are supposed to be two-way players. Well, how come you're giving up 150 points? So, this is all part of your evaluation going forward. It's not pretty, but unfortunately, anytime you mention the word rebuild, you better be prepared.
Yeah, and they made that clear in the summer that it was going to be a rebuild, and maybe it slipped by the rest of us what that meant. Here are the clips that we're talking about. It starts with Coach Darko.
Right now, as a team, we hit the wall. It's very simple. We hit the wall. We look tired. We look drained. Guys are not in a rhythm, and that's reality where we're at right now. And we gotta find a way how to get out of it. And the only one way to get out of it, it's always the same answer. It's back to work and staying together and watching the film and going through practice and addressing the right things and then getting better.
No, we just got to come out with a better effort every single night. We just can't allowing ourselves to get down in that position. Beginning of the game, we could have made better choices. We had some turnovers, myself included. But every single game, we just can't allow ourselves to get down to this point and keep letting teams every single game 130 points each and every single night or more for these last 3 games. That's just unacceptable. We just got to take it upon ourselves to come out with a better effort.
Well, you can't argue with that. And I'm going to go back to, Leo, 31 turnovers for 30 points in the game against Atlanta. Now, in the past, in some of those close games, they would have turnovers at the worst possible time to cost them the game. I mean, that's got to be cleaned up.
Well, I think turnovers have been an issue throughout the season. A lot of careless turnovers. And I think that's the big thing that gets Darko, that, a lot of these turnovers are just, senseless turnovers. You're giving the other team the ball on scoring situations, careless passes. You're not thinking what you're doing. You're just throwing the ball. You can't do that, right? In this league, turnovers destroy you. Every time you come down to 4, you got to give yourself an opportunity to score. But if I could say something about what we heard from Scotty, I think when you're, the hardest thing to do in this league is be a franchise player. And you heard a lot of when he was talking. And my personal opinion is when you're the franchise guy, you got to say, I got to be better. I can't let my team start this way. Okay. I got to be more aggressive. I can't turn the ball over. When you're winning, it's we. Hey, we did a good job. We fought like hell to get this game. When things are going this way, if you're the franchise player, you got to take it upon yourself to change it. And that's a big responsibility. And it's hard, especially like when you're losing and you're losing and you're losing, you got to be part of the change. And when you talk about a culture and developing a culture, well, you're also developing a franchise player. And I think these are big times for Scotty Barnes in his development. If a team starts slow, that's partially on him. He's got to get in that timeout, get in people's faces. He's got to be, diving on the floor. He's got to be going after the ball. That's a part of being a franchise guy. And so, I think it's really important if you want to develop the team and go through this, that everybody's accountable from the franchise guy down. And there's got to be, you have to step up in those situations and hey, Scotty Barnes as a franchise guy can't expect Jacoby Walter to be the leader. He can't expect, Mobo to come in and be the leader and be the guy that's setting the example. He's got to set the example. And that's hard. It's really hard.
Leo, what do you make of the idea that Darko put forward today, that you got to give Scotty some slack here because, he's playing without a point guard? Like the Raptors are intentionally putting him and RJ Barrett into situations where they're handling the ball an awful lot, maybe more than they ever would on a really good contending team, in the name of developing them into point forwards or, 5-position guys, whatever you want to call it. How do you see that?
Well, again, that's been the talk of Scotty since he got to Toronto, that he can handle the ball, right? He's got to handle the ball more. So right now, this is a rebuild. So you want to find out, are you going to put the ball in his hands? Okay, is this what's going to happen? Are you going to let him be the ball handler? Are you going to let RJ handle the ball in larger sections of the game? And you're going to find out if they can do it or not. It's pretty simple. Obviously, otherwise you could start the other guys. You could start the traditional point guards and go with it. But the fact that they're not doing that, they want to find out. And so you could say, yeah, hey, give him some slack. Well, yeah, you're going to give him some slack because that's not his position. But at the same time, you're trying to find out if he can handle that role. And again, it's different when you're just I get a rebound, I dribble the ball down court and make a play. But if I'm consistently the guy that's got to bring that ball up and make plays, that's a difficult position to be in for a guy that's really never done it. And there's going to be mistakes. I think he had 8 turnovers yesterday. And Scotty sees the floor extremely well, but when you're the point guard or you're the guy handling the ball, you got a lot of decisions to make. The most important decision can be who not to give the ball to, when not to make the pass, when to take that shot yourself, when to put the ball on the floor. It's not just handling the ball. Those are the decisions you got to make. So if you're going to have a player go through that learning process and see for yourself if he's capable of eventually having a larger role in that area, this is what you got to do. And unfortunately, you're going to take some lumps.
We just have a note here that R.J. Barrett missed practice. We don't know why, but won't travel with the team to Boston, where they play tomorrow at 3 in the afternoon. I mean, that's a tough chore to play Boston anywhere, let alone in Boston. And, there's another guy that won't be playing. That's going to be a tough day.
Yeah, and we see a lot of that, right? I believe he has an illness. And, okay, and let's be frank. And I'm not going to say this is what anybody's doing, but if you're going to talk about how do you do a rebuild, when a guy gets sick or a guy may be banged up a little bit, okay, you rest him a little longer. You don't need to rush anybody back. Make sure you're good. Because the reality is, when you're winning games, it's going to, from the idea of the rebuild, you want to draft, right? You want a great pick. You'd like to have the number 1 pick. You'd like to have the best shot of having that number 1 pick. So the more you win, the more you jeopardize that. And then remember when the Raptors were playing a little bit better and winning a few games, the East is bad, right? You had a lot of teams. It was hard to lose because other teams are losing more than you. So, when you've got a lot of bad teams in the league, and the bottom of the West, the bottom of the East, there's some bad teams. So you may have to make sure you lose. If you're going to do this, you're going to have to make sure you lose. And if that means sitting guys out and resting them a little bit more or taking time on injuries, that's what you do.
Yeah, just to be clear on that, so RJ is has been battling an illness, and that's why he didn't make practice today. So either way, he's not playing in Boston tomorrow. Dave?
Leo, just wanted to wrap up here with a question about the birthday boy in the NBA today. It's LeBron James turning 40 today, and of course he's been asked about his future and will he remain a Laker for the duration of his career. He was quoted today as saying that's the plan. He didn't exactly say I want to be a Laker, period. He's saying hopefully he won't have to go anywhere else. But what do you make of the Lakers' chances of making this guy, happy to stay there until his career is over? They're 18-13 in 5th place, just made a trade. Do you think they can squeeze something meaningful out of the waning days of LeBron's career?
Well, you hope they can, but they haven't shown that yet, right? And hey, first of all, what LeBron has done throughout his career is incredible, and his body's incredible. I think he said today that he really thinks he could play the game at a pretty high level for another 5 to 6 years or whatever, and I believe him. It's not necessarily what he's going to do, but I think he could too. But and players also have to realize when they don't have the top tier of their game, and they have to be able to adjust to that, and that's where you need your personnel around you. And my big thing when I look at the Lakers, And I said this when they got this guy, Anthony Davis. Everything was geared to get him out of New Orleans and to the Lakers. And, the amount you had to give up to get him, and he's never shown that he can be that guy. You look at him some days, you go, oh, my God, this guy's unbelievable. When he has one of these 10-game streaks of 30 and 15, and everybody's going, wow, look at this. This is Anthony Davis. Okay, but where is he the rest of the time? And I think LeBron needs that guy that you can count on every single night. And he hasn't had that guy, right? He hasn't, Anthony Davis is not that guy. Anthony Davis is very talented, but he's just not there night in and night out. His durability is not great. His intensity lapses. And I think that's a big problem because that was a big investment, and it really challenged other moves they were able to make once they got him.
Leo, thanks very much. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you guys too. Thanks.
Take care. That's Leo Rautins, our NBA insider, and going over the Raptors, who are busy against Boston tomorrow afternoon. The Leafs are busy tomorrow afternoon earlier. The Raptors are in Boston. The Leafs at home to the Islanders. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on at the World Juniors. So Latvia got by Germany 4-3 in overtime. And earlier Slovakia 5-4 over Kazakhstan in overtime. So maybe the ultimate prediction, Dave, would be, is anything going to end in regulation from here to the end?
Seriously, I mean, how about this Latvian team? I mean, who saw these guys, being a threat here and doing what they've done? It's incredible that these young guys are making waves at the World Juniors when nobody saw them coming.
Absolutely. So we'll wrap that up and also do best bets. That's next as Overdrive continues on TSN 2 and TSN 1050.
No chance. Today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. Make your pick and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Coming in with Vince McMahon theme. It's Doogie McMahon themed. You gotta love it. End of week 17. We're rolling with Jahmyr Gibbs, 25-plus receiving yards. David Montgomery's out. Gibbs is going to definitely have a bigger role, but we heard the inkling, guys, that the Lions may be resting some starters. So I think he could possibly get this in the first half. I know, I see you're shaking your head there, Tatti. It's not going to happen.
No.
But you never know. Narratives are out there, guy. Narratives are out there.
What's a narrative work?
True. Yeah, so Jahmyr Gibbs, 25-plus receiving. I think he gets that. He's averaging 52 receiving yards in his last 3 games. We saw Devon Achane light up this Niners team last week. We're also going with Ricky Pearsall, 3-plus receptions. Niners way out of playoff contention. I don't see Debo and Kittle being utilized as much in this game. And Pearsall just coming off a 37-yard week against the Dolphins. I think this is a play that could easily hit, and I probably think this is going to happen relatively quick. His line's only at 1.5 on FanDuel. I like this for 3+. And Tim Patrick, again, my narrative that these guys might not get as much run in a game like this. I see you shaking your head there, but Tim Patrick has hit this line in 4 of his last 5 games. If Amon-Ra, Jamison Williams, and Sam Laporta do have decreased minutes, this could be a 2-catch game for Tim Patrick. So this parlay totals plus 585 on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. FanDuel is the home of popular parlays this NFL season. Please play responsibly, 19+ and physically located in Ontario. Guy, what do you think? Pretty good?
Okay. But the Lions all year have gone forth and gone for it. Ridiculous trick plays at meaningless points of games. So you're telling me they're going to take their foot off the gas tonight? I don't think so.
I don't think they're going to take the foot off the gas. I know this is weird that it's only a 3.5-point spread on FanDuel, but the Lions are significantly better than this team. Like, I'm a little stunned by this line, but I guess we'll see what they're cooking, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm with the Tab, man. They don't know how to take the foot off the gas.
That is true.
It's just not in their DNA. It's not in Dan Campbell's DNA. And I think they're going to just destroy the 49ers here just to make a statement as they roll into the playoffs.
Yeah. High on Jahmyr Gibbs, Tim Patrick on the Lions. So
Doogie,
we'll see where that goes.
Who's in on the New Year's Eve edition of Overdrive tomorrow?
It's Al's brother and the man in the middle, Dave Feschuk.
Fess, you're not leaving, are you, Dave? You're just gonna.
I'm just hanging out. Yeah, I got to keep my video feed going now that it's working.
It's all good.
I'm not shutting it off until tomorrow.
I was going to shut mine off because I could put a picture up that was 25 years old younger. I mean,
there you go.
All right, okay. Thanks very much to everybody, and Happy New Year to everybody. And I guess on the way out, Overdrive returns tomorrow at
4 p.m.
We'll chat then.